Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 14 of Nutanix Weekly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. We're missing Harvey Green at the moment. I don't know if he is in something that's running late. He may have actually told me he wasn't going to make it, and I'm so scattered I don't know it. But I've got Jirah Cox, and that's all I need. And I think if we say Harvey's name 3 times, he'll show up like Beetlejuice, right?
And I'm never busy, so I have nothing else to do. So I'm always on time, not in demand.
Extremely busy, and I appreciate you making time to do this. It's extremely valuable. Oh, there he is. We only said it once, and he showed up. Harvey Green, how's it going?
Pretty good.
Does your son think
had a time with me this morning? That's all. Well, this afternoon.
Doing all the green shirts because you wear green shirts and your last name is Green.
It just happened that way today.
Technically, any shirt he wears is a green shirt.
Yeah,
that is true.
in Ireland, all the stew is Irish. So.
That's right.
Harvey's son came up to Lake Norman where I live, and he just saw the lake and assumed I owned the whole thing.
He did.
Wow, good job. Good job. Points for you, Harvey, on how you talk up Andy to your son.
That must be what happened. The truth is, I can't even afford to live on the lake, much less own the whole thing. But that's it. All right. Well, guys, this is an interesting podcast for us because we had a plan to do a certain topic, and then that kind of shifted around, which isn't unusual. But the show must go on, as we've said, and content is important. And there's plenty of content. There's no limit to the content that we can work with for this podcast. And Jirah stepped up and picked a couple blogs for us that are around the foundationing process, I think. And we're going to talk to him today about those. The first one that he put on our topic agenda, so it's 2 really, and I think they're related. But the first one Jirah brought up was the invisible, what's the actual name of it here? Oh, crud, I lost it.
Yeah, Cameron's blog is titled Invisible Infrastructure.
Invisible infrastructure, which is really the whole idea behind hyperconverge and specifically Nutanix is, and it's got a lot to do with the XenTegra story, right? We didn't want to get into infrastructure, and then software defined and simplified deployments showed up, and there you go. Now all of a sudden we can do infrastructure because it really becomes that simple. Jirah, let's talk through the blog that Cameron wrote. What was your main reason for calling this one out and having us add it to the conversation for today?
Sure. So we actually recently just shipped an update to this, and we haven't named it yet. It's called Foundation Central. Version 1.1 is out now, but we didn't even cover 1.0 when it launched. So we can cover like kind of the what's new and even the why did it launch in the first place. So Foundation Central, and this blog post is from Cameron, who's our PM over it. He's run Foundation for a number of years for us, and we love Foundation, right? It breathes life into new clusters in an hour or less. Makes deploying a new cluster very, very simple, very straightforward. This feature enhances that, and it moves Foundation from a dude or gal, anybody with a laptop and a server cabinet and a bunch of new nodes. Mm-hmm. Into a function of Prism Central, runs in your data center. And picture if you needed to deploy, 3 new nodes at every whatever, hotel, fast food restaurant, location, branch across the country, you'd go blind paying for services to have somebody go out there with a laptop to every single cluster and stand it up, foundation it, and then get it on the network.
Hey, Jirah, does it make sense to go backwards and talk about the old way of doing it and how someone like Harvey or myself or you would show up with a layer 2 dumb switch and TCP/IP, I think version 6. It would just do kind of like this discovery, and from there you would start the process. Is that enough about the old way to be able to talk more intelligently about the new way?
We can, and they both still exist, right? Both options completely stay on the table, because how would you get your first cluster to be able to use the new stuff that runs on a cluster, right? It's Foundation Central. So, or sometimes you have no network, right? Network's not up in the building yet, but you want the cluster online. Foundation is the app. It actually quite literally is an app for Mac and Windows now. It's been like an engineering VM that your installer can run as well for a long time. That, like you said, you throw it on a simple flat switch with connectivity to each of the new nodes that you want to bring up. And it goes out and discovers them, like you said, over v6, and can assign the IPs to them, assign AOS version, hypervisor version, right? Whether it's vSphere or AHV to that cluster, and then create that cluster. And even if it involves like reimaging, it's the deployment workbench for your partner or even your internal IT team to deploy Nutanix with.
And Jirah, just to be a little more specific, right? That foundation applet I assume it still is a Java applet that finds the foundation code running on one of the clusters, and then you're talking to that one, and that's the magic that talks to all the other nodes and creates I said it wrong, talks to the node, the app running on one of the nodes, and that node is what orchestrates the building of the cluster of the original 3 machines, right?
Both and all of the above. Yeah. So it can find running code on nodes that leave the factory with code on them, right? So like Nutanix nodes, models from Lenovo, from Dell, from HP, all have code on them that can be discovered by the Foundation app. Other nodes like UCS is a good example. Those obviously come from the factory with no code on them. So we can discover those via the, for UCS, it's the SIMC address, right? The out-of-band manager, and still image the Nutanix OS onto those nodes. So whether there's code on them or not to discover, you can use Foundation.
So I'll tell you one of my biggest horror stories. I spent almost 2 days in a data center, 1.5 days before I realized that the customer had hooked up the fiber connections, and my little flat switch layer 2 hub wasn't part of the communication, and I just could not figure it out. Finally, I went around, saw the fiber connections plugged in, unplugged those, and voila, it all worked.
There you go.
What a nightmare.
So that's been the Nutanix imaging process for forever, and hasn't been retired. Still exists for sure. I do it about once a week to get various kinds of lab nodes up and running for lab testing. The new version, though, let's say you needed to go very broad with your Nutanix deployment, and this is thankfully happening quite commonly with customers. I need to put these nodes in every branch across the country. Mm-hmm. And it's just not scalable. It's not doable to pay for a human to go visit every single branch for this deployment. Foundation Central moves that intelligence of Foundation into Prism Central, running in your data center. And I like to use the analogy of it makes your nodes behave almost like a VoIP phone that you would drop on a user's desk, right? You plug it in, it gets network connectivity, it learns via its DHCP lease where to go check in. In this case, via some DHCP option flags you can set on your DHCP server. And those nodes running factory code, like we talked about, will then call out to Prism Central and say, hey, I'm here. I'm ready to form a new cluster or get added to a cluster or whatever. And you, as the admin sitting at your desk, go to Prism Central and say, create a new cluster out of those 3 nodes over there. And done. You just leave that deployment task out there hanging for them. Those nodes check in, find that cluster creation task. They go do it, whatever you want them to do, whether it's keep the code you have and then just do an upgrade, or flip from AHV to vSphere, or whatever you want to do. Create a cluster, get it up and running, and then be open for business. So it's a zero-touch deployment for remote clusters, all managed by your Prism Central running in the data center. So we shipped this last year, and it you can kind of tell how it dramatically lessens the amount of humans standing in front of a server cabinet time to get these all deployed. You can even do some geo-specific stuff that's pretty fun. So I don't want to image nodes in Europe with a file server from South America. I can actually, via my DHCP leases, right, create some locality to these things to where you use my Europe deployment staging server to host my payloads for like AOS or a hypervisor. Use my North America one, right? I can have some locality to that design. So that's the base release of Foundation Central. It's a service, runs within PC itself. And then we recently updated, right? So that's kind of the...
Jirah, before you go there, so help me understand. So that's Foundation Central running as part of a service inside Prism Central.
Yep.
Which Prism Central was a Windows box or a Linux VM? I'm sorry, I can't remember.
No, it's fine. It's a virtual appliance. We give it to you, right? You just deploy it.
Yeah. And then it's all key to the nodes coming up and getting a DHCP scope option. And what is that scope option that these devices are using to go nowhere to talk to?
Yeah. So from Cameron's blog post here, option 43 he's using code 200 and code 201. So option 43, and then the codes there specifying, what is the Foundation Central IP address to go check in with, and what API key should I use to authenticate against it, so that communication, that check-in to Foundation Central is authenticated using an API key.
And
So
200 and 201, those are typically, what are those used for typically?
Great question. I don't know the answer. They might be custom to us. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Go ahead, Harvey. You had a question?
yeah, I do. I have questions. They're very selfish questions, but at the same time, everybody else could learn from them at the same time.
Go for it. Selfish questions are good.
To start with, I guess this all has to be done on the internal network, right?
It's a private network function. Yeah, for sure. You wouldn't do this over the wide open internet.
All right. Very good. Yep. No,
Where there rarely is DHCP, to be fair.
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure we said that. Also, this is a function, you said, of being able to do this within Prism Central. How long, in your estimation, does it take to set this piece of it up?
5 minutes, maybe less.
You were going to give me an answer.
Well,
like that.
well, there's a couple of phases, right? A couple of phases. It's a button or two to click in Prism Central to say enable Foundation Central. And I think, don't quote me on this, it probably, like most things we do, probably start the Docker container running the app on PC, right? So it couldn't be simpler. What will take maybe a planning meeting or two is finding your DHCP admin and getting some flags added to your releases and making sure that those scopes go out and can reach the right ports at the right sites. And then you do have a couple options, but for full credit, you probably want to deploy some regional distribution points, right? Some web servers that can hold the payloads for like the AOS release that you want to be deploying onto those nodes, depending on network latency or what pipes you want that to be pulled across within your network.
Okay.
So, but for a web server, you can use, literally anything like that runs like Nginx or Apache, but also you can even take like Objects, our S3 storage service can also serve as a web server.
Okay. And I just call them selfish questions because I'm trying to work through mentally figuring out how I can leverage this.
Yeah. No, for sure.
For customer installs and even more importantly, this would be a great addition to our normal setup when we go and set up our XenTegra node on site for a customer. So this would be another great addition for them to see, this is what we can do, and possibly even build that configuration out and kind of pass it to them for when they get ready to continue along their Nutanix journey.
You could even use this. I know well, at least one of y'all sets of lab nodes is like a 4-node in a chassis setup.
It is.
You could even set this up as a 3 nodes form the HQ cluster and treat the 4th one as a robo site, right? And so we're gonna use that one as our simulated, this is our 1 node site out remotely, foundation it via FC with DHCP.
Okay.
So Jirah, do you have to set up the first cluster the old-fashioned way, or you can do it this way from the very first node to the very first cluster?
It's probably not the way that I would set up a customer's first cluster ever, because they probably wouldn't have PC running. They probably wouldn't. It also, there's probably some minimum value to get from the system from setting up based off of future deployments, right? So if they're going to set up maybe one large data center cluster and be set for the next 3 years, that's less valuable to them than if it's like, hey, we're going to set up 10 branches this year and 10 next year and 10 the year for that, as they do a larger refresh on Nutanix, right? They would get more value from an automated imaging system like this.
Right. Yeah, I've got a customer in mind that has the strategy at this point. They've already, bought into their first cluster, and they have the idea that they will add a node every year to, continue to increase their availability, and be able to have the environment grow with them as they're growing. That's kind of what they're going to do as a strategy, and I think this would be a good way for them to, be able to bring in a new node, plug it in, when they decide they start splitting off, they putting it in the same cluster they have right now, they don't have to worry about doing this part of it in this way. But as they decide to split off and separate into separate clusters, then I think this would be a good way for them to do that and manage that piece of it themselves.
You made a great point, right? That yeah, for regular cluster expansions, you don't actually need this, right? Because the cluster already running can discover new nodes and image them or bring them up to current code if what's on them is older than what you're running. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, good options to have.
So, Jirah, what is specifically being announced in version
1.1?
Whatever this is, I'm sorry. This is the next one, right? Or is this the original?
That is the original. There is the one that you're looking at right now is the original, and then that's 1.1.
So, Jirah, we completely cover the original, and now we're ready to talk about 1.1. Or are there any other attributes of the original concept that we still need to cover? By the way, in the blog we're looking at from from Cameron Stockwell. There's an awesome video in this one too. I was watching earlier that kind of lets you see it in action. Anything we haven't covered on this one?
I think we did a good high level. Yeah. Usually at this point, if customers have specific questions or use cases, this is where they would kind of come up as part of the discussion. But yeah, I think we've done pretty good credit to what it can do.
Okay. All right. So let's jump into 1.1. This blog was from what date? Can we tell on here? How long has this been out?
Ooh.
This is February 2nd is when this post came out.
There we go.
Just like the start of this meeting, Harvey's a little late, but not that late. What, too soon?
Hey, got there before I did, so I won't knock it.
All right, so this is 1.1. Jirah, how do you want to do this? You want to walk through oh man, there's a lot of bullets in this thing. Well, not that.
What? A technical blog post with bullets in it. I'm Jirah's lack of surprise. The big one here is so VLAN designs. So if you're remote nodes at all these deployments, you want them to be discovered on to get DHCP on the default VLAN, but then re-image from a cluster and come up on a different VLAN. That's now supported. So a VLAN that you can only get onto via tagging into it. The ways to sort for it. So let's say, imagine you had 100 remote sites, right? Which really isn't unreasonable to think about for this kind of feature and deployment method. So you've created a bunch of sort of deployment orders, right? Recipes for all these various sites to check in and then come online after they formed a cluster. You can do much more granular, much better reporting as to, what did I leave out there for instructions, right? Versus 100 unsortable foundation instructions. You can sort by stuff like API key, by hardware serial number, by subnet, right, which often is tied to sites. So better reportability there. And then some revamp of the UI, a little bit more polished there, and as well as history, right? Who created this cluster? What nodes did they use? When was it done? RDMA NIC pass-through. So RDMA is an advanced form of networking from node to node. So we can now also see that those are present on the clusters and image it with those NICs in use as well. We mentioned IAMv2 is now supported here. That's our new authentication model that lives within Prism Central itself.
Now that's supported for the Foundation Central management. Is that what that's for?
Right. So if you've authenticated to Prism Central via the new IAMv2 is basically like a new authentication engine, then you can now use FC 1.1 within that. And then this was interesting to me, but I tried to think about some use cases for it. API creation throttling to avoid DDoS attacks. So that one, I can't say I had any customer cases attached to that or have insight into the engineering release, but it's an interesting use case as well to mitigate that, right?
Yes. Yes.
So clear from this was mostly, just enhancements and some fixes along the way. I mean, that's not uncommon in 1.1 release.
Right.
Jirah, how often do you expect you guys to be evolving this particular, or is this, pretty much is all you're going to need? It is a very basic function, but what do you think the future of this looks like?
Yeah, in my opinion, I think it was developed with a lot of the needs in mind out of the gate, right? So it was really developed to hit a lot of pain points for our larger global customers that are deploying clusters quite rapidly all around the world and kind of want a way to bring order to that chaos, bring more order to the process, and get that done faster with, hey, it's 2020, 2021, less humans traveling to data center cabinets to make that work happen, right? So it was developed in pretty close handshake, pretty close lockstep with our customers that kind of needed it the most. So it's pretty fully functional out of the gate. But I'm sure we've got some pretty interesting roadmaps for it, and we can circle back when we have more to announce there.
So this is interesting. In my first real day on the job working as a Nutanix partner, I remember going up to the Durham office and someone walking me through the process, which I thought was kind of black magic a little bit with the TCP/IP version 6 discovery on a dedicated little private non-intelligent network. And at that moment, they said, well, don't worry about this. It's going to get much easier someday. And this is the someday, it looks like. But at the same time, that old process became kind of near and dear to our hearts because it just worked every single time. If you can get the network isolation in place, which was super easy when you plug it into that $50 switch that you brought with you, if you remember to bring it, you run to Staples and buy one. But this, however, seems like a much more enterprise way of rolling this out. And as you pointed out, the travel concerns as it relates to 2021 and beyond, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, for sure. Because it's easy to imagine. Well, like you said, the process, you can actually draw a pretty straight line of it getting easier from the initial foundation. Well, the old timers tell me, right, it used to be a stack of thumb drives, right? That's way before my time, before any of our time, I think, with Nutanix, to foundation, right, where you just put in all the code you want the cluster to run, have it find the nodes and hit go. And an hour later, you've got a cluster up and running. To the foundation app, right, after the VM. So now it's a compiled app, runs natively on your Mac, runs on Windows, no VM to run that in. Mm-hmm. To then now it's just a service you can run in one data center to image nodes at other locations. But then it's also, it's easy to picture that as the first step, right? Like once that cluster's online, now, hey, here comes Calm, right? Deploy my app stack to site 328, right? And then check that in, give the developers access to see those VMs, let my application admin see that, push out new code to those VMs. Like it can just, that cluster can just have a fully automated lifespan the entire time it runs.
Yeah. So
go ahead.
The downside of this is, now I'm not going to be having to go on site, which I'm talking to a customer this morning about some other legacy infrastructure where I've got to go on site and deploy it. I'm not going to go on site and see the customer. There was multiple times I went on site, at least I thought I was, to see a customer and build some FaceTime, found myself in a colo all by myself, and they were on the phone like, well, this didn't work out too well.
Yeah. I mean, you were right. You were going on site and they just didn't, didn't join you. Yep.
I flew to Indianapolis and there was nobody there but me.
Ah.
or the one data center guy that was there, he had on his flip-flops and he could care less if I was there. Well,
we have, it's in the use cases are pretty endless, right? We've shipped some new form factors. We call the NX branded one is the 1120, but they're real tiny, right? They're colo depth, right? So they're short depth servers. So you could fit 3 of them in a closet. You could fit 3 of them under a desk somewhere if you needed to form a cluster. And so given those are so tiny, right, it's even easier to imagine I ship 3 of these out to a hotel and the manager just puts them on the desk where I tell them to, plugs them in to power and network and walks away, right? And it literally gets that easy of a deployment.
And Jirah, are you talking about the little ones the size of a book? I've got a couple sitting in a rack over here.
They're bigger than that. Do we give specs here? Yeah, so they're 10 inches deep. So they're like 1U shaped, but they're 10 inches deep. So
that's
yeah.
Yeah. And Jirah, everything we talked about here, all this stuff can support a 1U, I don't want to call it a cluster, but maybe you do call it a cluster, but in a situation like a remote office where I need to power up some VMs for whatever purpose, could be desktop with fallback into the data center if necessary, but that's the kind of stuff we're talking about here, right? Some edge use cases.
I think edge is where it really shines for sure. Yeah. Like, putting a node, putting 2 nodes, putting 3 nodes in every dealership, in every hotel, in every branch in your chain. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. When you need to run services at the edge, it's an easy way to get them deployed and then get a full life cycle on them.
This is really giving the customer the cloud experience because now they never even have to see the hardware.
Can be, yeah. Even easier, right? Because it's like, what if the latency of the cloud was like around the corner or down the hallway?
Right.
Yeah, they got that one little box that runs locally. You use Foundation Central to push it out, and then their desktops run locally, super duper fast. And then in case of a worst case scenario, they fall back to the desktops back in the data center, which are not super duper. They're just super fast.
There you go. Yeah, for sure. Right. And then could you even make that easier with like, it looks like one maybe pool of desktops to them, but use this one if it's available and that one as a fallback.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Fun stuff. Fun to talk about hardware, but now back to the software.
Yep. Shockingly, they need each other. Yep.
They do, don't they? Well, guys, it's been good. Any additional comments on Foundation in general?
In general, you almost have to. I like the way you put it, Andy. That it seems a little magical at first. You have to kind of see it to believe it. I know when I first saw it, it was definitely eye opening. And actually, this morning I was on a planning call for a customer launching a POC. We're planning out how we'll foundation their nodes and get up and running very, very fast. And
then what about, let's talk about anything about Prism Central that, has this foundationing service running on it, but anything that now that you got somebody's attention around this topic that you just want people to know about Prism Central, because it is a pretty powerful tool and we can't go into all of it. But what's the 1 or 2 things around Prism Central that you think most people are surprised and don't know?
It's where a couple of recent highlights for that. Files recently has moved from Prism Element to Prism Central, letting you, as you're looking at your organization-wide view of the world, see files, right? See our SMB file shares, become a part of that. As well as just launched AHV cross-cluster live migration. So if you're in Prism Central, you can live migrate running VMs from one cluster to another. And that all, of course, joins stuff that lives natively in Prism Central, Flow for microsegmentation virtualization firewalls, objects for S3 storage. So Prism Central gets even more centrally, my word. It's everything is getting its toes in there to keep you in not just one window, but even in just one browser tab more and more and more.
Yeah. Harvey, anything else around what experiences you've had with Prism Central that kind of helps move the needle?
No, I'm still chewing on Jirah saying it's more centrally. I like. I like
not official marketing speak. You can tell.
We're IT guys. We struggle with big words. All right, guys. Well, with that, how about anything else in the world of Nutanix, Jirah? Conferences this year? What do you guys have going on this year?
Check real fast. I'm pretty sure we've announced it.
Yeah,
we did. Okay,
I did get an email about Nutanix Next.
Perfect. Okay, I always blur the line about. Did I read that internally or is that public?
No,
all right.
It is cool. There's a website.
Awesome. There it is. Nutanix Next coming September 20th through the 23rd. Remote for one more year again. So put that on your calendar and attend this year as well.
So maybe the 3 of us can we can rent a room, like a conference room, somewhere nice, and we can encourage people to come meet us there. We'll have our own little meetup.
That makes total sense. Yeah, for sure.
I'm ready to do something. I'm actually going to Manhattan tomorrow night.
Wow.
But I'm ready. These virtual conferences, I'm just about virtual conference to death. However, Nutanix and everyone else needs to do the right thing, and that's why this is going to be online one more time, and then hopefully that's over in 2022. I'm
already excited because I'm looking out here and I see some of the keynotes are already outlined, and the first one is Nutanix-Azure announcement. Hopefully that is the one that I've been waiting for.
Yeah, we need that one, and that's going to be big for desktop as a service plays for sure. VDI.
Bated breath.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining again. I appreciate it, and we'll do it again next week.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Talk to y'all then.
Thanks.